we go. Hey friends, and welcome to this week's edition of Roaming Taste Videos. This week we are making a burnt sugar steamed pudding, which is an ode to my homeland of New Zealand. I would probably hazard a guess that almost every single Maori family has a kind of version of this steamed pudding throughout New Zealand, and so my attempts at rewana bread have failed, so this is my next best option to make some kind of traditional Maori cuisine that has definitely been influenced by the British culture, and I hope you enjoy it. I grew up eating this with my best friend who's Maori, and you always knew it was a really special occasion when her stepmom made this, and most recipes will say to serve this with custard, but in her home and at a lot of gatherings that I attended, it was always served with just pouring cream. So that's how I'm going to show you how to do that today, and I really hope you give this a go. Do not be put off by burning the sugar. That is a really interesting experience if you've never done that before. I certainly hadn't before today, and it was actually super easy. So just follow the instructions and you will have success. I hope you give this a go, and if you do, please let me know in the comments below or tag me on Instagram at Roaming Taste and let me know your thoughts. Thanks.
For the ground spices, please see the caption below for the exact breakdown. Before doing anything else, I cubed the butter and returned it to the refrigerator so that it could get fully chilled. You'll want to start by burning that sugar, which is quite an unusual process and one you likely have never done before. Most instructions stated that you simply put the sugar into the saucepan and that you don't touch it until it is fully dissolved and burnt. However, I noticed, and you might notice as this dissolves and caramelizes, that the thicker sections that had been left in the saucepan really didn't dissolve as effectively, so you will notice that I shook the saucepan to make sure that it dissolved and caramelized and burnt. Whilst I was doing this, it takes about 5 minutes, I boiled the kettle and I measured out my cup of boiled water so that I could add it as soon as the sugar had reached the perfect burnt stage. You really want it to still have a little bit of lighter color to it, because the darker it is, the more bitter it will taste. So what you're looking for is that the sugar has fully dissolved, and once it has done so, you'll want to add in about 1/3 of that boiled water and stir it through, and then repeat until you've emptied the water. Now, once the burnt sugar has been mixed with the water, you'll want to put it into a bowl and set it aside to fully cool. At this time, you'll want to prepare your pot that you will steam your pudding in and turn it on medium to get it hot. Now we get to making our pudding. You'll want to put the sugar and the flour into a bowl and stir those together. Then you'll want to add the chilled and cubed butter. I noticed that in most recipes just said that you just rub the butter in until it resembles breadcrumbs, but what I found was that you don't want to overwork the butter into the flour. So you want to work fast and not heat it up too much, but you also really want to get that butter as fine rubbed into the flour and sugar mixture as possible, so that it ensures a nice even pudding consistency. I have tried to find out when steamed pudding first came to New Zealand, and there isn't really much in the records in this area. However, it really is intrinsically a part of Maori cuisine now. Often steamed puddings are cooked alongside a hangi, which is the process of cooking a meal through steam underground. And so most often you'll find steamed pudding being served in Maori households on special occasions, and so that is how we mostly eat it in New Zealand. And I can't actually recall a time where I ate a home-cooked steamed pudding in my lifetime in New Zealand from someone with a British heritage versus a Maori household where it is very commonly made, whether it be in a hangi or with a boil up. It's really a part of Maori culture now, and I think it's a really beautiful sign of how beloved it has become within Maori culture and intrinsically within New Zealand culture, because of how much Maori is a part of each and every one of us who are born and raised there. I found that once I'd been kneading and rubbing the butter into the flour and sugar, that it became quite hard to distinguish which clumps that were held together were the rubbed in butter versus lumps of butter that had not been rubbed in yet. So I highly recommend spending as long as possible rubbing in the butter until it's as fine as possible in your fingertips. So you will then next add in the baking soda and the mixed spice. I chose to use half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, a quarter of a teaspoon of ground ginger, and a pinch of nutmeg. I did see one recipe call for more traditional allspice. However, no one really noted in a few of the recipes I saw specifically which spices to use. So this is more on what I've experienced. After stirring those through, you'll want to make a well in the center of the dry mixture, and then add in the beaten eggs and the burnt sugar caramel. Now, a great pudding has a really light and fluffy consistency to it. So what I opted to do is mix in the flour upwards as much as possible. And then once the batter was effectively formed, I then worked my way into trying to smooth out the larger pieces of butter, as I've previously mentioned. You could see some there. But I did not want to beat the mixture to stiffen it up. I still wanted it to have that really nice light consistency once it has been steamed. So what I opted to do was try and push the butter as much as possible into the walls of my bowl. This has been sped up just for time's sake, but this is probably why my earlier point about really rubbing that butter in when it's just flour and sugar and the butter is easier than trying to smooth out lumps of butter once you have the batter all prepared. Now, if you have a metal bowl or probably a pudding bowl, it would be best to cook your pudding in. That would be great. However, I did not have that option, so I cleaned off the edges as much as possible so that I could then prepare with much ease my baking paper and my aluminum or tin foil as much as possible. Now, I did watch an instruction video on this prior, and you do want the aluminum foil to have a slight overlap just in the center, so that if the pudding expands, that the topping that is really tightly tied around it has some way to expand. Now you'll watch here that I only wrap the string around the bowl once. I do not recommend this. I recommend you do it twice, and I actually went back after I recorded this and cut the string I had tied and tied it twice as tightly as possible, just because my gut instinct was telling me it just wasn't as tight as it should be. Now, the reason for doing this is to really make sure that the water does not get into that pudding, otherwise it will be a soppy mess. So that's why you want the twine to be as tight around that bowl as possible. And then once you have tied it, you'll want to trim the edges so that the water does not get carried up through the baking paper or the tin foil. And then it's ready to go into the already hot pot and to cook for 2 hours. Now you see we've been patiently waiting. We've got that handle that we prepared earlier with our string. It's a little bit steamy still, and this is really the moment of truth. You don't really want to take the lid off of the pot too much whilst it's cooking. I basically set a timer and then just kind of let it do its thing. I did check halfway through to make sure that not much water had dissipated. There was still enough in the pot, and to be fair, because the lid was on, we didn't even really lose much. I think there was maybe only like a quarter of a cup that dissipated in the entire 2 hours. Once you have got the steam pudding there, you want to take off the lid very carefully and see how it turned out. And here it is. It kind of rose in the middle there more than I thought it would, but it still looks really pretty. Now we need to know if it is fully baked or cooked through, and the skewer came out clean, making it perfect. So I kind of put the skewer around the edge, just the very edges of the top of the bowl, so that it could slide out easily, and upturned it carefully with some oven mitts. And that is it. You can see the steam is still rising off that baby, and it's really basically ready to serve. So you just want to have some either custard or some pouring cream ready. You definitely want to pour that over the top, and then you really just want to slice it like a cake. This is absolutely best served warm, so I hope you slice it and have some friends and loved ones to enjoy this with, and enjoy.